The thing is, I was never the woman who disappeared into a marriage. I planned other people's birthdays, other people's anniversaries, the rooms where people felt most chosen. And I was brilliant at it. I knew what made a space feel like a decision. The thing is, I stopped being able to feel that at home. By the time my husband's birthday arrived, I had already decided that his reaction mattered more than his feelings, and any woman standing where I was standing would have understood why. The thing is, I never once imagined I would become the invisible one. My name is Valentina, and I coordinate events for a boutique hotel group. I am 34 years old, and I know exactly how to hold a room. I plan birthdays, anniversaries, and celebrations for people who want to feel chosen. The lighting, the flowers, the timing of every candle, I control all of it. People tell me I make ordinary rooms feel like they were designed for them. The thing is, I stopped being able to feel that at home myself. Sundays used to feel like a pause between the weeks I managed for others. Now they feel like a managed event I forgot to place on my calendar. Luca made coffee before I woke up, every morning at the right temperature. He checked the apartment heat before I ever needed to ask him for anything. He remembered the shelf I had been meaning to fix for 3 months already. The thing is, remembering details is not the same as choosing someone out loud. On our second anniversary, he packed my bag without telling me where we were going. He included the book I was halfway through and the right sweater for cold air. We ended up in a mountain town I had never once visited before that day. It was the only surprise that ever worked on me without feeling forced or arranged. I think about that weekend more than I have ever admitted to him directly. That was real, and I have never needed to lie about that part. But Sundays had become something else entirely by the time spring arrived this year. I stood at the kitchen island with my cold coffee and said nothing much. 2 bar stools faced each other, 1 cup left cooling in the morning silence. Luca was fixing the shelf behind me while I talked about a birthday event. His back was turned, but I could tell by the sounds he was listening. When I finished, he said the shelf should hold now and turned back around. I said good, and we did not speak again for the next 20 minutes. Any woman standing in that kitchen would have recognized what that silence actually meant. His birthday card was sitting inside my work bag, on the hook by the door. I had bought it 3 weeks early because I always plan everything well ahead. The inside was blank because I was waiting to feel ready before writing anything. Mia came for lunch that Sunday and asked me one question I did not expect. She asked whether I was planning his birthday myself or just organizing it for him. The thing is, Marco did not come back into my life dramatically or loudly. He was already there, photographing a brand event at my hotel on a Tuesday. His name was on the corporate booking when I arrived at the hotel that morning. I told myself it was professional, which was the first thing I got wrong. He photographed the lobby first, then the guests, and found me standing near the bar. He said my work made every venue feel like it had always been waiting. He looked at me before he looked at the room and I noticed the order. I stood beside a centerpiece I had arranged and received the sentence like proof. I read it twice before Luca came into the room where I was standing. I put the phone face down on the counter before he could see the screen. Luca asked who I was texting and I told him it was only Petra. That was the first lie and it was small enough to step right over. The thing is, I stepped over it before I had finished deciding to step. 2 days later, I gave Marco my personal number for a photography booking quote. My thumb moved across the screen before I had consciously decided it would move. Any woman in her position would have needed a reliable photographer for the season. That is what I told myself while I closed the screen and walked away. Petra met me at the wine bar near my office on a Thursday evening. She had been the kind of friend who made the wrong thing feel like wisdom. The place smelled like citrus peel and careful conversations that pretended to be careless. She said Luca was the kind of man women chose when they wanted safety. She said safety the way people say beige, accurate, familiar, and not very interesting. I did not argue with her and I ordered another glass without saying much. The thing is, not arguing felt the same as agreeing and I knew that. Petra had been divorced at 29 and called it the thing she had chosen. Her apartment was quiet in a way she never described honestly to anyone around her. She borrowed other women's chaos the way some people borrowed their neighbour's television at night. I knew all of this and I used it anyway because I needed her there. She told me safe men were fine for some women, only not for me specifically. I laughed and the laughter felt cleaner than anything I had felt in weeks. Any feeling that clean at the wrong table should have been a warning of something. The thing is, laughter that feels clean is not always pointing in the right direction. Daria and Stefano hosted dinner that Saturday in their careful and warmly arranged apartment. 6 of us sat around a long table with wine and comfortable familiar talk. I said Luca was the most reliable man in any room he walked into. I said it the way I said beige, accurate, complete, and entirely without warmth. The table went slightly quiet in the specific way that means everyone heard something real. Daria laughed first, but her laugh stopped before it had finished arriving anywhere proper. Stefano did not laugh, and he set his fork down on the plate carefully. The sound of his fork meeting the plate was the quietest kind of disapproval possible. Daria touched Stefano's hand under the edge of the table, quickly and without showing it. I did not see the movement because I was watching the rest of the room. Luca sat beside me and did not say anything while I kept talking that night. I heard his silence as agreement the way I had always heard his silence then. That was something I had turned into a habit without ever naming it as one. The next morning, Daria did not send her usual message the way she normally would. That small absence was its own kind of answer I decided not to read. In the apartment hallway that night, Luca stopped me before I reached the bedroom. He was still dressed and I was carrying both my shoes loosely in one hand. He asked whether something had changed between us since the hotel opening he missed. He named the event and said he knew arriving late that night had been wrong. He asked what had shifted and said he wanted to understand before he assumed anything. He offered to cancel his Saturday plans and spend the whole day with just me. I told him that planned presence was not the same thing as real presence. The thing is, I heard him trying and turned his effort into evidence against him. He went quiet in the hallway and I walked past him and into the bedroom. His quiet was not acceptance, but I filed it under acceptance anyway that whole night. Any woman who had stopped being heard would have done the exact same thing. Marco's next message came 3 days after the dinner, at 11 in the evening. He asked whether the birthday party planning was going well and whether I needed photographs. I was already in bed when his message arrived and Luca was in the bathroom. I opened the thread under the blanket before Luca had come back into the room. I typed a reply before I had consciously decided what I was going to say. He had not checked the thread, but he could have, and I already knew that. The thing is, the reply was already written before my conscience had time to arrive. I locked the phone and placed it face down against my chest, under the blanket, quietly. Luca came back from the bathroom and asked why I was still awake so late. I told him Petra had sent something and it was nothing worth explaining that night. That was the second lie, and it was already larger than the first one was. The thing is, larger lies require better lighting, and I had arranged my own already. Petra messaged after the dinner to ask whether Luca had noticed the table going quiet. I read the message lying beside my sleeping husband, with my phone under the blanket. I called the feeling boredom because boredom was the most manageable name I owned. The birthday card was still in my work bag by the door all that night. I passed it on my way to the bathroom and did not stop to look. I told myself I would write something real in it tomorrow, or the next day. The thing is, I planned his birthday party the way I planned everything else I built. I chose the rooftop venue because the city looked best from that particular height at night. String lights above the skyline, white roses on every table, late spring warmth in the air. I knew every choice in that room because I had made every choice in that room. The temperature, the lighting curve, the moment the first drink would arrive for guests. I built the room for his birthday, and I hired Marco to photograph it professionally. I told myself it was professional, and I had been telling myself that for 2 weeks. Any events coordinator would have hired the best available photographer for an important occasion. The thing is, I knew before I sent the booking confirmation what it actually was. Marco arrived with his camera bag over one shoulder and found the room first. He moved through the space the way photographers move, assessing, positioning, choosing angles carefully. He photographed the string lights, the white roses, the city sitting below the railing. Then he found me standing near the bar and he photographed me before anything else. He said I had made the city look like it was waiting for this specific party tonight. He said it in front of 3 guests who turned to look at me when he finished. I laughed in a way that carried across the nearest 2 tables without trying very hard. Luca was across the rooftop talking with Stefano near the far end of the railing. He looked over when he heard my laugh, and I watched him look and not come over. I told myself that proved something, and I catalogued it the way I catalogue everything. The thing is, I had been collecting evidence for months without naming what I was building. My work bag was on the coat table near the entrance with the unsigned card inside. I noticed it when guests arrived, but I did not go near the coat table that night. During the toasts, I stood at the center of the rooftop and raised my glass. I described Luca in front of everyone, the man who never forgot a single detail. The man who showed up, who held things together, who remembered every practical thing. I meant it as tribute, and it landed in the room like a careful eulogy. Mia did not raise her glass for the second half of what I was saying. Daria touched Stefano's arm, and he nodded once without looking in my direction. I did not notice either movement because I was watching the room respond to me. The thing is, I was always watching the room instead of watching the right person. Near the balcony railing between the toast and the birthday cake being carried out, Luca found me. He asked quietly whether we could speak privately for just 1 minute together. His voice did not rise and his face did not change from its usual careful expression. He asked why Marco was here and what the past 2 weeks had actually been about. He said he was not asking her to stop anything, only to be honest with him now. I told him he was making a scene at his own birthday party in front of everyone. The thing is, he had not raised his voice once and the scene was entirely my own making. He said he was not making anything, and he asked again, quietly, what was happening between them. I turned and walked back toward the party before he had finished his second sentence. His face did not change when I turned away, and that was the whole scene. Any woman who had felt unseen for that long would have needed to do something real. The thing is, what I did next, I had already decided before I walked out onto the balcony. Marco was near the railing when I reached him, and the city was below us both. He said I was the most alive person in a room I had built for someone else. I knew people could see us from the party tables behind my back and his. I knew Luca was somewhere behind me among the guests and the string lights. The kiss was brief and not romantic enough to destroy a life entirely by itself. But it was public and visible, and I had arranged the lighting myself beforehand. That was the whole point, and I had known it was the point the entire evening. When I turned back around, Luca was standing 6 feet away from where we stood. He had been standing there, and I did not know for how long he had been watching. He looked at me for 5 full seconds without anger and without any visible tears. Then he removed his wedding ring, the way he took off his watch at the end of a long day. He did it smoothly and without ceremony and placed it inside his jacket pocket quietly. Then he walked to Mia and said something I could not hear from where I was standing. Mia's face closed in the way faces close when something has been confirmed rather than revealed. I smirked because he had finally reacted, and I had been waiting for him to react. I mistook his pain for proof that I still existed somewhere inside his attention. The thing is, I had wanted him to see me, and I confused being witnessed with being chosen. Petra appeared beside me and said the look on Luca's face was something she had not expected. She said she did not know he had that kind of reaction available somewhere inside him. I turned to look at where he had been standing, and he was simply not there anymore. He had not stormed out or made a scene or drawn any attention to himself leaving. He was just gone from the space the way a chair is gone when someone moves it quietly. For one full breath, I saw exactly what I had done without any useful covering over it. I had built this room, arranged every light, chosen every rose, timed every moment of the evening. I had built it for him and performed in it for everyone who was not him. His absence was not a performance, and that was the truest thing I had seen him do. Then Petra squeezed my arm and said he should have spoken up for himself years ago. I closed the door and told myself he would be home when I got there that night. By midnight, the party video was already moving through the group chat without my help. Daria sent 2 words and did not use my name when she sent them to me. The birthday cake was still on the table behind us in the video, completely uncut. The thing is, I expected him to be gone when I came home that night. Instead, the apartment was exactly as I had left it before the party that evening. His shoes were by the door, and his coat was on the hook where it lived. The kitchen light was on, and 2 coffee cups were already set out for the morning. I stood in the hallway in my party dress and looked at the 2 cups carefully. He had come home and set out the cups before I had arrived back from the rooftop. The thing is, practical love is still love, and I had stopped being able to read it. I changed my clothes and got into bed, and he was already on his side sleeping. His breathing was even, and his back was turned, and the room was very quiet. I lay there and told myself his silence was a performance of dignity and nothing more. Any woman who had finally forced a reaction would have needed time to understand it. The next morning the coffee was made and sitting on the counter going cold again. He had made both cups and left mine where I would find it when I woke. He did not bring it to me, and I stood at the island cataloguing that specific difference. The thing is, he still made the coffee, and I still only noticed that he had not carried it. Mia arrived at 11 without calling ahead and without any particular expression on her face. She stood in the doorway in her coat with her arms folded across her chest quietly. She said she wanted to know whether I understood what she had seen from the doorway. She did not yell and she did not ask permission to say the things she had come to say. She said Luca had spent the last month trying to ask me what was wrong between us. She said I had answered him by kissing someone at his birthday party with people watching. Then she said one more thing, and it was the thing I had not known before she said it. Luca had been talking about my work to everyone around him for the past 2 years. At his firm, at dinners, to people who had never once been inside a room I built. He described my events to his colleagues and named specific parties I had coordinated for clients. He told strangers what I was good at and what I had built and what my work meant. He had been pointing at me in every room I was not standing in for 2 full years. Mia said this without warmth and without waiting for me to respond or absorb it properly. She said it the way evidence is entered into a record, clearly, completely, and without decoration. I told her I appreciated her concern, but that she had not seen everything that led to this. The thing is, I heard family interference where she was actually offering me a mirror that morning. She left without waiting for me to finish the sentence I was building in my own defense. The apartment felt smaller after the door closed than it had felt before she arrived. I sat down at the kitchen island on one of the 2 bar stools and looked at nothing. Then I softened my voice and waited for Luca to come out of the study and hear me. I told him the kiss was a symptom and not a decision I had made deliberately that evening. I said I had felt invisible for a long time and that I had handled it in the wrong way. I said I wanted to fix it, and I meant some portion of that when I said it. He listened the way he listened to structural problems at work, quietly, completely, and without interrupting. He asked whether I was saying it or meaning it, and I told him I meant both things. He said he would need more than those words now, and I heard a condition being placed on me. The thing is, I turned his request for honesty into evidence that he was managing me again. Any woman who had finally spoken would have needed proof that the words were actually landing. I told him he was turning my feelings into a project with variables he wanted to solve efficiently. He said he was trying to fix what was broken, and I said I was not broken at all. He said he had not said I was broken, and the room went quiet after that exchange. That afternoon, I was alone in the bedroom while Luca worked in the study with the door closed. I was looking for something in my work bag when my hand found the birthday card at the bottom. I pulled it out and held it in both hands and looked at the blank inside page. I had bought it 3 weeks before the party because I always planned every detail well ahead. I had been waiting to write something real in it. Not a printed line, not something borrowed. Something about the mountain town and the right sweater and the book he had packed for me. Something about Sunday lunches when we ran out of things and neither of us minded much. I had never written any of it because I was waiting for him to earn the words I was holding. The door opened for one full breath, and I stood there holding the blank card in both hands. I had kept it blank the entire time, and I had never given him the chance to receive it. I had been waiting for him to deserve something I had never once offered or extended toward him. Then I put the card face down in the kitchen drawer and told myself I had been too busy. Full calendar, event season. Any professional would have lost track of a card like that. The drawer closed and I told myself that was a reasonable explanation for what I had just understood. That evening, Luca went to the study and opened the filing cabinet without saying a single word. He removed a folder and his passport and placed them both inside his work bag deliberately. He checked the bag twice the way he checked everything twice before considering it finished and correct. He said nothing while doing this, and I told myself he had a work trip approaching soon. The bag zipper closed with a sound that was too neat for a man packing for a work trip. I almost asked him about it, and then I did not ask, and the moment passed completely. Petra had been answering my messages in 20 minutes that morning, and then in 40. By evening, her response took over an hour and arrived with less energy than before. She said she had a work thing but was thinking of me and sent nothing further after that. Daria sent a voice note asking for space and said she hoped I was okay inside it. I listened to it once and set my phone face down on the kitchen counter beside the drawer. The unsigned card was in the drawer and the drawer was closed, and I did not open it again. The thing is, by Wednesday the apartment had become a different kind of quiet entirely. Not the quiet of a Sunday morning or a managed evening after a long week. The quiet of a space where someone has already made a decision and is simply finishing the paperwork. Luca moved through the rooms with a purpose I had not seen him carry before that week. He was not cold, and he was not loud, and he was not performing any kind of pain. He answered practical questions and made coffee and checked the mail and said very little else. The thing is, organized grief is more frightening than anger in every room it occupies. I had been waiting for him to break, and instead he had become completely and quietly unbreakable. Any woman watching her husband become methodical would have needed to say something real. I said it in the living room on Wednesday evening with the apartment door partially open. The neighbor was walking past in the hallway and would have heard fragments through the gap. I said Marco had understood me in a way Luca had never once tried to understand. I said it in a voice that was louder than the conversation required or deserved that evening. Luca closed the apartment door before he responded, and the click of the latch was quiet. The thing is, I had chosen the volume, and I did not acknowledge that I had chosen it. He sat across from me and said one thing directly, without leaning forward or raising his voice. He said he had loved me in every language he knew how to speak fluently. He said he was not sure those had been my languages, and he understood that now clearly. He said he would go and learn mine if I told him I still wanted the marriage. He said it once and did not lean forward and did not repeat it and simply waited. The thing is, a man who says something once and waits is more frightening than one who begs. I heard the offer, and I turned it over, and I found the condition I was looking for. I told him he had never once stood beside me at one of my events and introduced himself proudly. He had introduced himself as my husband, while my work stood beside us completely unnamed. My name was on every room I had ever built, and he had never said it beside me. He had been my husband in every room I worked in, and my work had not existed. Luca looked at his hands for a moment, and then he looked back up at my face. He could not refute it, and I watched him understand that he could not refute it. He said he had been wrong about that specific thing, and he said it clearly and completely. He said he had assumed his presence was the same as pride, and he had been wrong. Then he said, "But that is not why this is happening." And he said it without any heat. The thing is, being right about one true thing felt like it should have covered everything else. Any woman who had finally been heard saying a true thing would have held on to it. I told him that love said under those conditions was not love in any form that counted. I told him he was performing the correct response because I had proved it could be demanded. Something in his face finished deciding something it had been considering for several days already. It did not look like anger, and it did not look like defeat, and it was not grief. It looked like a decision that had been made somewhere private before this conversation had started. He said he would handle things properly, and those were the last real words he offered me. No raised voice followed, and no list of grievances, and no door slammed behind anything. 5 words, and then the apartment was a different room than it had been before them. I told myself it was a performance because the alternative required me to understand something true. I called Petra from the kitchen while Luca was still in the living room behind me. She answered and said she had a work call beginning in exactly 4 minutes from now. She hung up before I had finished the first sentence of what I had called to say. No explanation arrived in any message afterward, and no callback came before midnight that evening. I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand, and the silence was very specific. It was not the silence of someone busy or distracted or running slightly behind their schedule. It was the silence of a person who had already made a quiet decision about where she stood. I opened Marco's thread and typed that I needed to see him sometime this week if possible. The message turned to delivered and then to read, and a thumbs up arrived at 9:43. Nothing further came before I went to bed, and nothing came when I woke either. The thing is, a thumbs up from the person you chose instead says everything about the choice you made. Luca moved through the apartment with the specific purpose of a man finishing a task cleanly. He went to the hallway and stood at the entry table for longer than he usually stood there. He lifted his key from the ring with one hand, and the sound it made was small. He placed it in the bowl beside the mail and picked up his bag from the floor. I followed him from the kitchen into the hallway because silence had started to feel like furniture. I told him that love spoken under pressure meant nothing, and he already knew that was true. I told him he was handling everything dramatically for a man who had simply been found out. I told him leaving proved he had wanted an exit long before this particular Wednesday arrived. He opened the door and turned back once and looked at me without any expression I could use. He said he would be in touch through the appropriate channel, and that was entirely all he said. The door closed behind him, and the apartment was quieter than it had been in months. I stood in the hallway and looked at the bowl with his key sitting inside it alone. I picked the key up and held it and then placed it back exactly where he had left it. I went to the kitchen and looked at the drawer where the birthday card was lying face down. I did not open the drawer and I did not take the card out and look at it. I called Petra again at 10:15 and the phone rang 7 times and went to voicemail. I opened Marco's thread and saw the thumbs up still sitting at the bottom of the screen. I typed a second message asking whether he had a time in mind for later this week. The 2 grey ticks sat there and did not turn blue, and no reply came before midnight. The mediation office was on the 4th floor of a building near the family court. The room had beige chairs and a glass table and one carefully placed tissue box. Clara Benson introduced herself, and Luca was already seated when I arrived there. Mia sat in the waiting room outside, not as a representative, only as a sister. Clara placed a document in front of me without ceremony or extended explanation first. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage with a motion for temporary orders attached. The orders covered the apartment and the joint accounts and a monitored communication requirement going forward. The first hearing was set for June 19th at 9:30 in the family court. I touched the edge of the document the way I touched event layouts before final sign-off. I looked at Luca's full name beside mine and hated how calm the paper made us look. Clara went through the evidence packet, and nothing inside it was new to me at all. The balcony video was there, time-stamped, the city lights clear, and the string lights above us. Daria's written account was dated 3 days after the party and ran to 2 full pages. The message thread from my personal number was printed in columns and organised by date. Item 7 was the birthday card, unsigned, found in the kitchen drawer during the document exchange. I looked at item 7 longer than I looked at anything else on that table. Clara asked why I had worn his ring and used the joint accounts through all of this. I said the thing is, and then I did not have a sentence that sounded clean enough. My version of events sat in the room and nobody in the room picked it up. Marco's email had arrived through a mutual contact 2 days before this mediation date. He hoped the situation resolved and he regretted his involvement and he was not available further. He named nothing specific and copied no one and used no word that could be held against him. He had been clean before the meeting started and he remained clean throughout all of it. Luca's attorney was present and said very little and wrote things on a yellow notepad. Mia did not come into the room and I did not look for her through the glass. The joint accounts were frozen pending the June 19th hearing at 9:30 that morning. Luca had arranged everything before the meeting and that was the last thing I understood about him. 5 concrete things changed in the weeks that followed the mediation appointment that morning. I moved into a rented studio above a bakery with bread smell rising through the floor every morning. The frozen accounts meant 2 bills arrived the same week I paid first and last month. Daria and Stefano removed my name from every shared thread I had been part of for years. Marco did not contact me again, and I heard through a vendor that he had kept working. Petra sent one text 3 weeks after the hearing date and I did not answer her. The birthday card was listed as item 7 and Clara moved it to the side at the end. I did not take it with me when I left the mediation office that afternoon. The thing is, I built rooms where other people felt chosen for a living and I was very good at it. I built his birthday room and performed in it for everyone who was not him specifically. He had been pointing at me to strangers in every room I was absent from for years. I got exactly what I reached for and it felt like nothing by the morning after. She still plans birthdays for other people and she knows exactly how to make them feel chosen. She has not been able to explain why that feeling never once lasted until morning.